Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Inside Out. I'm Kim Argetsinger, and we're normalizing the entrepreneurial experience one real conversation at a time. So get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and join me for a behind-the-scenes look at the mindset, grit, and strategy that creates business success from the inside out. Today, I'm super excited because we have a really awesome guest with us. We are getting social and talking relationship building without the overwhelm online, one of my favorite topics, with social media strategist Anna Kochakova. Hopefully I said that right. We're going to check in with her after this. I cannot wait to dig into this conversation. If you haven't had the pleasure of connecting with Anna before, Anna's good social ambassador on a mission to help people navigate the social media world. She works with women in service businesses and helps them grow and scale their businesses using Facebook ads and social media. She's one of the few experts who's out there advocating for smarter use of social media and other digital tools. Her focus is on real success strategies and deliberate use of social media, which I'm all about, and I cannot wait to hear more about some of her insights around this. So that's enough for me. Let's introduce and welcome Anna. Anna, hi, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So I just gave you an intro, but I'd love to hear in your own words if you want to just tell us a little bit more about your business and about what you do.
Oh, pleasure. Definitely. And I initially started my journey from very, very broader area. It was digital marketing, SEO, copywriting, and then social kicked in as well. And I worked for a bunch of digital agencies, and I could not understand where we were going with the strategies. And the application was usually even without a strategy. And through that frustration of not really getting it right and just doing it because a lot of the times of the pressure of doing it, because somebody mentioned that it should be on social because it's so hot at the moment. But I felt that was just not the right approach. We should be looking at what's going to work for a particular industry, a particular business, but also what stage that business is in, and so on and so forth. There's so many variables and so many moving parts. But every time I worked with a digital agency or had a conversation with a client or potential client, most of the times it was talking about, I really want to be out there. And I couldn't understand what that meant. That didn't really help to get leads or clients or income. And out of that frustration, I moved away from working with other agencies and moving into creating good social media.
I love that so much. And I think that's so many of us who are entrepreneurs and creatives, our work comes out of either struggles and pain points we've been in personally in our life or frustrations we've seen in the industries we're in. And it makes me so happy as someone who's come to love social media and what it can do for us, but who has also been frustrated in the past and confused by it. I'm just so grateful that there are people like you who are taking that shift and taking that stand, because you're far and few between. So thank you.
Pleasure. I've noticed that there's also a lot of advice around, you have to be there, and just gives so much pressure. And I felt that pressure as well. And then I thought, what if we could actually turn this around? Maybe the majority advice, just maybe, might be not right. So maybe I can dig into that and see maybe there's something else. And it happens to be that there is something else.
Yes. And I definitely want to ask you about that more in a little bit, because I think with social media and the online platform, we're so lucky. We have so much information at our fingertips, but with that, there's so much misinformation and misguided information, or information that is possibly correct, but it's correct for a different subset of people and it doesn't apply to us. I know I definitely got into a place when I started my business when I was almost near burnout, because I was trying to do all the things and be in all the places. And there was such a pressure to constantly be on social media. And so I'm really curious to hear. I want to ask you some questions down the road about that, because I have a feeling you'll have some really good insights about that.
Yeah, but I also noticed that there is something else to that too. When I think social first became really hot and there were so many people helping to understand and navigate social, I think some people managed to work out how to make a lot of money by helping others, but mostly helping them. And somebody could work out one approach to social and they try to apply to all other industries. And sometimes it's confusion, but sometimes maybe with bad practices. And I think we didn't stop there. I think a lot of marketers continued with this. I think the pressure was just growing and growing. And I think we need to step back and refocus once again.
I could not agree more with you. I 110% agree with that. And I think we do have to step back and refocus. Itching because I want to ask you a lot of questions. If you're okay with it, before we dig into social, I have a few questions I love to ask everyone just about the entrepreneurial experience. Are you open to those? Because I think they'll tie in nicely with this.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, particularly because of your really lovely anti-cookie cutter approach to social media, what success means to you in business or in life. I'm really big that success isn't cookie cutter. And that's, I think, what holds a lot of us back. We're trying to create our business success through someone else's mold. So I'd love to hear from you what success is for you in your business.
One of the first things is probably having meetings in my sometimes pajamas or jean jam stuff.
Yes.
That's definitely success for me. Or really being at a coffee shop and then having multiple meetings and sales calls. It's so much fun. I found that not feeling overwhelmed and not feeling pressured into doing things or stressed because I have to be there. Sometimes people would ask me why you don't have X amount of people following you here or there. I said I don't need to. I need to only service people that I can service. And for me, it's finding that happiness and freedom. It's always been the word freedom for me, to be honest. Any success for me is freedom. I have family overseas and I need to go and see them at least once a year. So I want to be able to go there and then I want to be able to travel, but I don't want to feel overwhelmed and don't want to be pressured. So freedom has always been definitely success for me, but that also means that balance. And I don't mean a little bit of working, a little bit of resting, but the balance of not having 20,000 people following you, but working out who exactly you can service and who you want to work with. And it was successful for me that way because I didn't have to worry about satisfying everyone. I just had to figure out who exactly my target audience and then figure that out for each of my clients and create a strategy to service those. And then it just flows. It becomes so much easier. It's such a relief. And every single person I worked with so far actually felt the same way. They felt like they had a permission to no longer chase the numbers. And we looked what numbers meant to them, and they felt they didn't have to chase them because they only needed this or that particular number to really feel the success and happiness.
You're speaking my language. I feel like I'm always preaching about how it's not about the numbers, it's about the relationships behind the numbers. So I feel like your work and your version of success and just even your form of freedom is all around connection and not having to be about these big numbers, because with that comes a different sort of responsibility and a lack of freedom. And yeah, I'm all about working in yoga pants. So that's definitely part of it.
But even coming to bigger numbers, it's the goal. So if the goal is a bigger number, we can always pull apart a little bit and see why the big number is the goal.
Yes.
And then the steps getting there. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just one of those steps and one of those goals to be honest about.
Absolutely. And I think thank you for clarifying that, because that isn't to say that we can't have the goal for a larger audience or that a larger audience isn't a positive thing. So I really am glad that you clarify that. I think it's more about where the focus is, and that it's more about having the right people that you're connecting with. And with that, you can have success with different size audience. I think that's what I'm hearing at least.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Other question I'd love to just kind of piggyback on that I'd love to ask, that I ask everyone. I'm really big on grit and just that passion and perseverance that goes into creating entrepreneurial success, that goes into creating a business. And I think we see, especially online, a lot of these overnight get rich quick 7-step formulas that can make a lot of us feel crappy. And so I'm curious if grit has played a role in your business and if there's anything around that you'd be willing to share.
I don't really like the word grit, but I think I know what you mean though. It's that hard work, of course, behind work.
I think grit can sound really harsh and sound like hard work. In psychological terms, it's more about having passion and perseverance for a long-term goal. So it's more the long game and having the passion for the long game versus being in something for like 3 months. Does that resonate?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's because I didn't use the word as much, and I think I use the word just being there doing the work. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Absolutely. It's interesting because I don't see a lot of my work as work, but there will definitely be days when I'm still up at midnight finishing something. But in that moment, I don't feel, oh my God, I wish I didn't have to do that. That just never happened. If I get to that point, actually, I usually need to refocus my work again and see whether I need to delegate something. If something becomes really, really difficult, it's no longer inspiring me as much, it becomes like I have to really grind, then that's definitely a delegation moment. But usually it's just so inspiring and it's so rewarding and I really enjoy doing it. But it is work. That means you show up and you test and you fail and you try again and you stand up again and you also admit that it's hard. And then you continue doing it and testing it. And with my clients, even, we have to test their campaigns. I can only take out people when I know I can help them, but we still need to test their work, their audience, and their assumptions. And then we're working. Then somebody finally happens. I'm like, oh my God, yes, it works. There you go. And then we go back to work it again. So it's almost a constant rolling, never actually stops.
What's awesome about your response is it's actually such a great example of grit, because I think we hear grit and we think it is this kind of hard, grinding, harsh sounding word, but in the true form, it's really having that passion for the long-term goal. And so what you're saying, that love you have, that passion you have for your work, where it doesn't even feel like work. I mean, that's, I think, the reason for most of us why we do what we do. I think that's such a great example just for everyone listening of what grit really is. And then also just the reality that even within that and even within that passion for your work, we still have to test. We still have to show up. We still sometimes have things test that the assumption doesn't match what we expected. And so we have to test again. And that doesn't always mean that it happens the first time around. And thank you, because I think that's just such a brilliant example of exactly what grit is. And just a reality of being an entrepreneur.
I like that. That's actually a very good call. And I think in the culture of when we want things instantly, it becomes a little bit more, I think it becomes a lot stronger, because we just want things now and we're testing them and we just want it to happen. And when it doesn't happen, sometimes we feel that, well, we're not going the right way, I'm stuck, or we just don't want to continue doing that. And it's sometimes might be difficult to come back and continue doing the work because of the culture we're in as well. So that actually really makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I this is not what our conversation is necessarily about, but I'm just curious just because I'm so big on testing and talk about it with my clients all the time and talked about it online. Have you found with your clients that there are a good amount of times where you test and you do have to tweak and readjust what the assumption is, and then you get an even better result, or that you get a result that's that much more significantly improved because of the testing?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually so crucial. In my program, I actually have a very first step that is a social media audit. And we go through everything that's been done before in the business. And it helps to set up those first tests, because I need to understand the benchmark and I need to understand what they've done before, what worked, what didn't. And even before we start testing, sometimes at the front end, everything looks fantastic. And I had a client who had a very good following and quite engaging. So I thought, you know what, we'll be able to even sell their classes or dance classes, sell their classes organically. It's going to be fantastic. Even the engagement wasn't that great. It was still there. It was a very big page, Facebook page. But when we had to look and really dig into it, we realized that the entire following was a different country from where they were selling to, and there was never going to be any value in that number at all. So we had to start from scratch and start testing and figuring out their audience. And even though they had a very good idea who their audience was, partially was not right, and it was not true. That also meant changing the entire strategy, setting up tests, and only testing finally helped us figure out who was the audience and what the messaging needs to be to sell. It's amazing.
Amazing and fascinating. Such an awesome example of the power of testing and just how numbers can be great, but how also they can be misleading sometimes, and just how we don't know until we take a look or test. I love that example so much. That makes me very happy. And also just how brilliant, because I think sometimes if we aren't testing or we aren't looking at the data that way, we can think we're doing something wrong or think that it's our work or that we're failing, versus sometimes it's just about where you're targeting your message or how you're using your message. So I think that's such a great example that a failure isn't always exactly what we think it is.
That is actually very true, because the client was really upset and they felt very almost desperate at the time, because they felt like they spent some time with someone else before for years growing the page, and it was more than 20,000 people, and there was a little bit of engagement there, but they couldn't sell organically and they felt really frustrated. And then when they had the answer, now we could move on and we could create a strategy to actually help them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the brilliance of data. Then you have a solution point. You have something to solve for instead of just shooting fish in a barrel and hope. Yeah. So good. So good. All right. Well, since we're already kind of talking social media, I'd love to dig in and ask you a little bit more. I know we've been talking about it a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more just about your general philosophy and approach to social media. I think people might find that pretty fascinating.
I really love social personally. I've actually came to it, I think, a little bit late, because I grew up overseas and we didn't have much of attention on social media, at least not Facebook or Instagram. We had our local stuff and all the focus was there. And later, when I moved to Australia and joined Facebook, probably 2008, it was really interesting because I could watch the whole process of changing it. And then I had to understand, how am I going to use it? And what's my view of that? And I only had data from other people. So I'd be watching what people were doing with that. And then because I started working in marketing very quickly, and then I managed to watch how other businesses applied and how different and crazy different it was, how personal use was different. As soon as people felt, okay, business, social media, it felt like there was a wall. And it felt like they had to put out flyers and sound different. And they were just not them anymore. And I was very confused. And I felt that why would I be so much different if I just put a name for my business? Why would I all of a sudden become a completely different entity from who I am? Mm-hmm. I'm the one who is providing the value. And that was back 2008. It was still there, and I'm still puzzled about it. But my view of social hasn't really changed much since then. I've just learned finally how I want to use it. But I realized that it's a tool out of a toolbox. There's many other different things like we can use using Skype. I use WhatsApp to talk to my family overseas and my friends. Those are tools, and I can turn them on and off, and it's really valuable. But tools can also serve as evil if somebody's using them for those purposes. And I think there's too much focus on social being the solution for everything.
Amen.
Or Facebook being the solution.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm like, yes, 100%.
And I'm surprised how that is actually not, it's not an intuitive thing at all. When I have conversation with my clients or with a prospect, I usually say, do you know you don't have to use it? It's just that's totally fine. And sometimes they feel like, oh, really? Well, that sounds so good. Well, you can also use this, or you can also try that, and you don't always need to be on social. Or somebody says, I really don't want to be on this live videos. I just don't like how I sound there or how I appear. I'm like, fabulous. Let's not do that. That's not you. Let's figure out what you do, and also let's figure out the most important thing, what your customers need and how you can help them. And then we'll figure out tools and ways to do that. And I think we need to refocus back on what we do. And that's why my take on social is, if I feel like I'm a bit tired of it, there's an off button. Super easy. The tool is gone. Don't have to worry about it. But then I can come back and create more leads for the business, or I can send a message to my family. It's literally a tool, just like I use my car, I use my washing machine. And I don't need to put so much godlike emotion into it. It's not the solution. We need to focus on how we can help and then figure out, okay, so what tools we can use.
I agree wholeheartedly. I some time ago was talking about, because there's people can get really frustrated with social media and get upset about social media and algorithms changing and this and that. And it's interesting because all of that is so much emotion on something that is exactly what you said. It's a tool. So I love your approach that it's a tool that we can turn on and off. It's a really powerful tool. It's a really great tool that we can connect with people in ways we couldn't before, but it's a tool. And love what you said about in the way in which we show up. We can all show up in different ways that really serve us and our people. So if blogging, I hear all the time, the blogging's dead and it doesn't work anymore. But if it works for you and it works for your people, it's not dead. It's like email marketing or doing a podcast or doing a live video. They're all just different ways that they're all tools in our toolbox. And so I love that instead of you must do this as the solution or your business will never succeed. I think there's a lot of scare tactics out there right now used in marketing.
It's a very good call, actually. It might be one of the reasons why it's so prevalent and so strong and there's so much emotion in it. Sometimes people actually say, look, no offense, but I just don't like social. And I feel like I'm not offended. It's not my product. I just know how to use the tool. So it's totally fine. And if you say, look, no offense, but I hate screwdrivers, no worries.
Right. I like running, and that's my tool for working out. If you don't like running, cool, go do yoga. They both work.
Yes, exactly. But I feel like those scared tactics might be partially a problem, and a lot of marketers continue pushing the same agenda. And we need to sometimes shut down and stop listening to everything around and try to hear what we need and what we want and just be really honest about it.
I agree. I've been recently too, I think this has been a kind of coming home to this focal point of blinders on and information overload and not needing even, I mean, as much as I create content, not even consuming as much content, because I think just going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, there's so much content and information overload out there. It's so easy to have that overwhelm us, and shiny object syndrome and so many solutions when we don't need all the tools. We usually need one or two that work really well. All right. Clearly, I called on you because I agree with everything you have to say, and I love all of this so much. So with all of that, then, I know you, before we went live, we were talking just a bit about the mindless boosting and the exhausting posting and vanity metrics, and you've touched on that a bit, and we've touched on numbers a bit. And I know that when people come to me, there's definitely that pressure to be in all the places all the time. And you've talked about your thoughts on this a bit, but I'd love to hear then, what are some of your thoughts about that type of boosting, posting? And if not that, then what do you suggest? What do you encourage as a way to connect or show up online?
I think ultimately people are forced a lot of the times into doing it. And I think it's great that people can try. But sometimes somebody who is a lawyer or a financial consultant or even well-being consultant, when in other areas we're not doing that full time, it can be really daunting. And Facebook almost realizes that. So they've got that boost button. It's just right there. And everyone can come in and click on it and quickly boost something. And boosting, if we wanted to go technical about it, it's just very limited, and it has two objectives, and there's no much you can do with that. And people boost things with the goal in mind to get either sales or some leads through or some action that they can put monetary value on. But boosting doesn't do that. In fact, it excludes that because it only has two objectives as an option. So you can only get some attraction to that specific post. But there's so many variables with that as well. The content of that post, the message of that post, the image of the post, and so many other things. So just going and trying to boost something usually leaves people very disappointed. And that's where I usually say not to worry about it, to be honest, at all, unless it's a part of a strategy, unless you know why you're doing it, unless it's an element of your strategy and there's a specific goal behind it. And trying and boosting it a little bit initially to me looked like people testing and trying things so they could learn from that. But I realized that they were just ending up being very disappointed, and it never really helped. And same with vanity metrics and with trying to get more following and more likes, and it's actually still very strong and existent. People contact me on Facebook actually a lot and straight away telling me how many people are following them and what they want to get and how many more followers they want and why. And I need to dive with them every single time. Why you looking for following? How would that help you? Or what is your business doing? Are you already converting from social? And this conversation usually takes a very different way, which they usually didn't expect, because it's still so in the focus of everyone's is getting following and boosting things, whatever is on the surface. And I think it's a bit of a problem, which just goes back to the same conversation of chasing things that people used to say worked, and they actually worked at some point. Facebook was a little bit different, and this thing actually meant something. And a few years ago, I would have said, yeah, let's get some following, and that would be really good because you have a community you can talk to now. It's a little bit different now. And apart from all the technical variables, I think that business owners need to, first of all, look into their goals, what they actually want to achieve, and then look at possibility of employing social for it, maybe looking somewhere else. And then things like numbers and things like boosting, it just wouldn't even be in view. None of that would matter because I would just focus on the goal of, say, I want to have 20 new sales a month and I want to have 2 more clients a month or whatever that goal is. And then from top working down bottom to the 2.
I was at the digital marketing conference earlier this year. I've referenced it a lot. And I think one of the things that stood out to me, everyone was selling their method and their platform and their way. But what really, if you were actually listening and looking underneath, what they were really all doing that was common was reverse engineering their product or their program and the sales they wanted to make and what had worked for them. And the reason the platforms had worked, it wasn't because it was the platform, not that the platform's bad or good, but it was their message and that they had done exactly what you said. They had focused on specific goals and reverse engineered those and then showed up. And then, yes, they did grow a following. Yes, they grew a business. But as you said earlier, it wasn't the platform that was the key or the solution. It was how they were then showing up on the platform. And I Definitely agree with that. I wonder, because I'm by no means a social media expert, and I just know you hear so much about the algorithms. And if you don't have a certain number of followers or a certain number of likes or a certain number of engagement, your posts don't get the same visibility, or they're not getting in front of the same people. And I think, and when we're talking about boost, by the way, everyone who's listening, we're talking about that actual boost button on like a Facebook or Instagram post where you can pay to boost a post. But I think there's a temptation because there can be a worry that your posts actually aren't being seen. So I'm curious, do any of those metrics help with the visibility from your experience, or is it still go back to just focusing on the goal and that message and kind of reverse engineering that?
I think those elements are variables, and those elements would come in place based on the strategy. So the focus is definitely the key, and the prime goal is definitely the key. My clients that I work with have pretty good following usually. But as I was saying about this example earlier, you can have really big following that has no interest in the product, and then that doesn't matter. And then actual loyal following would actually matter. Yes. And some of my clients sell organically as well because people are expecting their product and they just can't wait for it. They're in a smaller niche as well, so they have a different strategy then. And for those people specifically, for example, algorithm changes, we just don't do anything for them. It doesn't matter. Nothing changes. Everything's still the same. But when we wanted to get actually very recently, they're selling tickets to one of their really big events, one of my clients, but somebody on the side started selling their tickets, but they're not tickets, they're tickets, of course. So it was a fraud. And they wanted to get the message out to everyone to make sure they only buy tickets from authorized resellers. That would be kind of post that we would boost. But again, without going too technical,
sure,
it's you could boost it on the front end, or you can have a post and then go on the back end and make the much better magic and have a lot more control over what you're spending over, because boosting on the front end will just eat up all the money without getting too much.
I feel like I'm always preaching. I'm like, if you just spend a bunch of money on the front end, it's a really expensive experiment. And it's like, you want to make sure you have your back end in place that you're driving people to. Otherwise you have a road that's basically going to like a crumbled shack. Maybe not the best example, because I feel like that's what the boosting is, or that's what social media, it's like traffic. It's a road that takes you somewhere. And I'm just so I can understand correctly, and just for everyone listening, when you're talking about that organic following, and if you have an audience that's loyal, the algorithm doesn't matter as much. Is that because they're already loyal, paying attention to they're already engaging, so the algorithm's already, just algorithm is the talk, it's already favoring them, they're already interested in your work, so it doesn't even matter what likes or dislikes you don't get? Is that,
I think it's,
am I articulating that in a way that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it is actually playing with the algorithm anyway, because people, the more you engage with something, the more you see of that. So they have very high engagement, and you can calculate engagement for every page, every post, and we try to have it of the same number or continue growing over time. Again, if that's a goal, which needs to have a reasoning behind. But if people engage with something already, they will continue seeing things from that page or from that person. It's actually very similar to our personal accounts, and nobody really thinking about that. But we see a lot of our content from our friends, and once we stop following someone else, we don't really get much of their information. It's a very, very similar situation, even though it's not as restricted as with pages. And actually growing the size of your page can be a byproduct of a good strategy as well. So you no longer need to actually invest in just doing that because you want to have a loyal community. The advertising and the strategy, they would get the following as a byproduct. They will just come to your platform as a result. So we definitely wouldn't want to spend just on following growth any time or any effort.
I love it. So I guess with that, I think this leads into this question, because we've been talking about organic growth, which is growth where you're not paying versus paid, like Facebook ads or Instagram ads. And obviously, I know you help people with ads and the strategy and the data and really breaking that down, and you're a genius with that. So I'm curious, do you always recommend ads?
I do.
Okay.
I always recommend ads. It's a very big part of my program as well. And I say no to people actually quite often as well. If it's a very new business, it might be very challenging to start growing it quickly. But once you get first sales in, it becomes a lot easier. And once you get first sales for social, so you can definitely work on growing it organically through your personal profile, through your LinkedIn, through your whatever other platforms you have there. You don't need to have that wall straight away, which is Facebook business page. You can use other means. And once you're having sales through that come through social specifically. So you validated your products and you validated that messaging and you know it works. That's what ads, and the rest is just going to flow so well. I definitely recommend it, but as I say, because I don't work with startups, and I used to, that's actually a very big pull of my work in the past. That's the experience that I had.
So in general, you recommend when everything's tested, when you know that it's proven concept, the message is proven, you overall recommend ads. Is there, and I know you're kind of touching on this, but just so we can spell it out, is there a time when you think ads don't make sense for someone? Is it just when someone's brand new, or is it just when something has been tested and not proven? Or do you use ads to test that? I'm curious because I think there's a lot of times, I think ads can become a solution as well. And so I'm just curious when you think it's not quite the time to use that solution, or maybe there isn't a time.
That's actually a very good question. And I was thinking about that. It's probably 3 areas that I've noticed. One of them is the very beginning of business. It is interesting because you can definitely use ads to validate and to test. If you had a new message or a new service, when I had a new service that I introduced to my business, for example, I use social for it, just not ads. But you can do the same with ads. But I just find it less effective because you're going to be spending money on validating how good your product for the audience you think it is for. You could do it for free. Or, I mean, of course, paying for your own time.
Sure.
So it's just a better choice not to use it. But you can definitely do that. Just very careful, because that can get really tricky. And I've also noticed, based on my past experience and working actually a lot with startups in the past, I've realized that retail businesses you can get really tricky for them as well, because their margins are quite small and they usually find it just very frustrating. Every time they run an app, they want to get instant results from it and they want to sell straight away from it. But they haven't, a lot of the times, they haven't done the work or figuring out how they're different from all their competitors. It's such a flooded market for a lot of different retail businesses. Of course, not of them at all. But they do find it quite difficult to really invest in getting sales and getting leads and growing because of their small margins. And also, there are areas that I just don't think social is that good for. I talked to a few businesses from rural areas in Australia, and they wanted to, actually quite a few, which was a bit of a surprise for me, but they really wanted to use social to reconnect with their current clients in the area. And that's a very big distances from one town to another. But their customers were just not really using it. And in the rural area, just really, small cities and small towns, it really looked like we needed to see them. We needed to handshake. We just didn't really have any sort of presence or advertising. So those 3 areas, I think, should probably steer away from social for a bit.
That's fascinating. So the 3 areas, it's the startup or the brand new. You can use social ads to test, but it's kind of an expensive way to go about testing. It's the retail and then the rural areas, or maybe anyone who has a business where their audience just really isn't utilizing social media that much.
Yes, definitely. And I think retail, there are many businesses who are really working well on social. But when we look at them, they've started it such a long time ago. And they're already utilizing what they have. Starting out now as a retailer is just going to be a little bit challenging. There are a few other steps to take before really plunging into that. And maybe just stay away from it for a bit.
That's such gold in terms of advice. And I love that. So thank you, because that's, I think, really clarifying for a lot of people. And I think a question that a lot of people have. I wonder if you have any thoughts to share. So I work with heart-centered, passionate, they're driven entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, coaches, creative types. For anyone who's getting they're dipping their toes into the ad space for the first time. I mean, I know this is a massive topic and that's why people hire you, but if you have any thoughts or tips that you might share for someone who's dipping their toes in for the first time.
It is a big topic indeed.
Yeah. And it's fine if you don't have a go-to tip, because I realize that's like, how do you start a business?
Yes, pretty much like that. Yeah. It can still be done, and it's something we can go and learn how to write stuff. It's all good. The start for me for any campaign is, of course, figuring out what we want to get out of it and figuring out the target market. And I don't mean the gender, the location, and the color of the eyes. I mean really diving into that. And I've noticed that is such a big problem for so many people. Working with just business owners, or working with just doctors, or working with just children or their families, this is not enough. This is not enough for a good campaign. This is not enough for a good strategy, only because they're going to attract a lot of unnecessary traffic or clicks. That's money wasted. We're not going to hit the right audience at all. There's many other variables I can think of. And I think sitting down and figuring out their audience and working on the messaging and testing it and validating it and getting some data, this will help them to jumpstart any campaign. And then social will be a lot easier and smoother for them. But I just don't want people to continue thinking that they just can walk into it, put a few dollars behind and get magic out of it. It's a fairly complicated tool, but in no way I mean that they can't learn it. And I think it's fantastic that they understand it as well. But there's just so much more business planning and marketing planning behind it before actually pulling the trigger.
I think that's such a brilliant, thank you. That's such a brilliant answer, because what I'm hearing is, it's what we've been talking about here. And it's what I feel like I preach. It's like, to start with, you still need to have your core foundation in place and like really drill down into that. And it sounds like not just your messaging, but what makes you different and stand out and unique. And then who your people are, like really getting in and knowing them on an intimate level so that you can have a message that is going to stand out, because there's a lot of noise. And I love what you're saying. It's very learnable. Driving a car, the first time you drive stick shift, it's complicated. There's a lot of things to learn. You have to test and tweak, but once you learn it, you can repeat it, but you need to still have some basic lay of what the rules of the road are. And so I love that what you're saying is like, you can't just throw a bunch of money at an ad and hope that it's going to perform. And you need to have, again, that foundation there and also be willing to test, is what it sounds like you're saying, which I think that's really solid, not magic genie in a bottle in terms of an answer. So thank you.
And I must add that this testing doesn't really stop, even with very successful or big sharks or whatever we want to call them. The problem starts when I've worked with a very big global brand as well, and they're started to crumble in many areas because they stopped testing and pivoting, and they were introducing a lot of products later realizing that nobody wanted it, and they couldn't figure out who it was for. And missing those basic elements as you start growing is quite scary, actually. And coming back and testing it again and again, it's that great once again. It's coming back and testing again and reevaluating everything fairly regularly. And I love with my work with clients, we do that as well. When we finish a particular period of time, we go back and then evaluate everything. And then we need to understand, okay, we're launching a new project. Will it work the same way, or do we need to do something differently? And that process is a lot of fun, but it's the work that needs to be done as well.
Thanks for bringing it full circle, because it's absolutely that grit. And thank you for sharing that, because I do think there can be a tendency to think that once you hit a certain level, it's like you've arrived and you don't have to do any of these things anymore. And I think that's such a fallacy. Business is solving problems. So there's always problems to solve. You're always testing and refining. With every level of growth, you're testing and refining. I think a lot of people listening know for a hot second, I work in the advertising space. But with huge companies, they're still testing, like Coca-Cola. Y'all better believe they are still testing. And they're also testing a lot of things that we never even see, that never makes it to market because it failed, even though they're a very successful company. They throw so much money at testing and advertising. So I think it's just, thank you for that reality, because I think it's, especially as solopreneurs or as creatives or people who really, we're close to our work, we're passionate about it. I think we can take it very personally, or think, once I get there, then I'm done. Then I can just forget about all the testing. And that's just not the reality of business. So thank you for that. So I have one more question I want to ask you before we go, because I think you, of all people, will probably be a great person to ask this. I imagine there are myths in every industry, and I imagine with social media, there's just a whole ton of myths. So I'm curious, are there any myths that you would like to bust that we haven't touched on already? Is there anything that you're like, I just really want to tell people this is just so not true?
That's very interesting. There's so many. Where to start? My favorite recently is Instagram. And Instagram seems to be a channel for so many people that sells. And Instagram in Australia doesn't really have a sales button or any ability of that. They've just introduced something new that you can click through to your sales page on the website or landing page. And sometimes people say, I'm having awesome following on Instagram. I'm actually selling through it and a lot from it, and people contacted me. Awesome. Once again, with the social media audit, and when I look for it, we realize that's not true at all. What is happening is that they're getting a lot of people asking questions or commenting on their images, and then half of it is usually bots, and then they just go away from there. With the acquisition process, it can be tricky to try and track that. That's why I really appreciate Facebook ads actually, because they are very trackable, and it's a lot easier to track back your money and see where people came from. Very precise and very granular. You don't do that with Instagram, unfortunately, and tracking it back is extremely hard. And having some conversation on Instagram is fantastic, but we could never track it back to sales unless somebody was actually saying, hey, can you send me a link? I'm going to buy it. I send the link and then I can see it for Google Analytics, and that happened as well. But I think there's a confusion between people having some validation of their images on Instagram and then getting actual sales. And I haven't seen yet someone tracking the sales well. So I really don't believe it at this stage. And I continue having these conversations, and actually just talked to someone who's a traveler and a writer just the other day, and she also reckons she's selling through Instagram, and we're having this conversation now because I'm fascinated. But in my almost 10 years in this space, I've never seen anyone selling through a beautiful pictures platform directly. And I'm really digging into this area right now, and this is the case of confusing what things mean. It's very similar to, I worked with Google people for a little bit, and they call some of their goals when, say, people reach the website, they call some of their goals conversions. And conversions to me are sales. Money in the bank is a conversion for me. And I've realized that how interesting is that we have so many different organizations with different terms. So now every time I'm working with my clients, I need to make sure that they are not confused and that they're not falling under myths, and that we are clear on what we're actually calling things. And I think from there comes the same myth of thinking that Facebook can solve everything for you, because others say, well, but I'm making millions out of doing it, but we never go and see their bank details, right? And we never see their accountant, and we never go through their books.
Right. We also don't see their ad spend, which is very different than their take-home income.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, so I think those two things are major for me at the moment, is selling through Instagram directly and Facebook being the solution to everything. Are probably the biggest thing that are just in front of me at the moment all the time. And I get asked a lot around those things as well, trying to help and understand those. And of course, the boosting button. It's interesting that it was part of our conversation as well, but many people always say, yeah, I've tried boosting so many times, it just didn't do anything. Why is it even there? How does it work? It's so silly. And Facebook is not working. It's because that button didn't work. I think we should put it in a myth box altogether and not even touch at all.
Those are great tidbits. And I'm thinking of the myth, what's it called? The boost button. It makes me think a little bit. Someone's like, well, I'm drinking the workout shakes, but I'm not losing the weight. But like, they're still eating pizza and not working out. It's like, but that's not how it works. Facebook put that there because it works for them to make money. Like, we have to think about the fact that they're a business. Anyway, I just love that you touched on that. And I love hearing the honesty from you, because this is your business. You do help people with social media. You're a genius at ads and at social. So it's really refreshing to hear from you that while you believe in that and think they absolutely work, that it's not the end all be all solution, something we can just throw money at. And what a great distinction about selling directly from Instagram versus it being maybe an entry point into quite possibly a funnel or some other form of nurturing with an audience or some other, sequence or something else that's going on behind the scenes. I think that's just such a great distinction there, because I'm sure we could just like peel that apart in like 45 other myths. But thank you. I so appreciate this. It's been awesome.
Pleasure. I had a lot of fun. Loved it.
Yeah, you're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So much wisdom in this. Curious, because I have a feeling everyone listening would love to connect with you and will want to know more about your work and your world. So where can everyone find you online?
I definitely have a Facebook page that is Good Social Only. Just if you go into search on Facebook and type in Good Social Only, it's just right there. I do connect with people personally a lot, and I love personal messaging. So if you just found my name on Facebook, that'd be fantastic as well. And because I'm currently testing a lot of things myself, and I'm talking to entrepreneurs and especially women in service businesses about their challenges, I'm currently connecting with a lot of people and having 15 to 30-minute conversations with them about their strategies and about their success so far, and then giving them advice wherever I can. That helps me understand what challenges they're going through and how I can help them. If anyone is looking to get a bit of help in this area, that'd be wonderful. You can always find me on Facebook for that as well.
I will leave links for all of that below. That is such a generous offer. Thank you for that. So just in case anyone missed that, that's a way to connect with Anna, and she's having real conversations, those real human conversations versus bot conversations, so that she can help you, but also help understand some of the challenges people are having. So I'll make sure that I put a link for that as well as to everything else for you in our show notes below this audio, so that everyone can reach out and connect with you.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome. And any closing thoughts you want to share before we close this out?
I think one thing that I really want to share is don't worry about trends that much, and don't worry about how many times to post or where to post. Focus on your target market. Focus as much as you can on how can you add value. Sometimes it might mean pivoting here and there or changing things, but it's so important and it's so amazing to be really valuable and really helpful. All the rest will really smoothly come in.
Thank you for that. That's such yes. That's all about adding value, connecting, eyes on your own paper. That's such a beautiful message to close with. Thank you. I love that reminder for everyone. You're amazing. Thank you for being here. And for everyone listening, thank you so much. I'm wishing you your version of success. I'll be back next week with another topic.